The autumn wind swept through Redemption Creek, Colorado, carrying whispers that cut deeper than any blade. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of town, her worn shawl pulled tight against the cold and the stairs. 6 months had passed since they buried Thomas, and still the town treated her like she carried plague. She wasn't welcome at the general store anymore. Mrs. Henderson made that clear when she'd refused to sell Sarah flour last week, claiming her husband wouldn't approve of serving that woman. The church ladies crossed the street when they saw her coming. Even the children had learned to echo their parents' disdain, though they didn't understand why. Sarah understood, though. She understood perfectly. Thomas Mitchell had been Redemption Creek's most prominent citizen, a banker, a deacon, a man everyone respected. But respect built on lies crumbles fast, and when those lies surfaced after his death, the town needed someone to blame. The widow was the easiest target. They didn't know the truth. They couldn't know that Thomas had kept secrets even from her, that she'd discovered his ledgers only after he was gone, that she'd spent every day since trying to make things right. But the town didn't want truth. They wanted a villain, and she wore the convenient face. Sarah clutched her basket tighter and started the long walk back to the small cabin outside town. The main house, the grand Mitchell residence on Cedar Street, had been claimed by the bank. Everything had been claimed. Everything except the truth she carried, and the small cabin Thomas's mother had left her, the only property that bore her name alone. The sound of hoofbeats made her step to the side of the road, keeping her eyes down as she always did now. Let whoever it was pass. Let them pretend she didn't exist. But the horse slowed. "Ma'am," the voice was deep, unfamiliar. Sarah glanced up, then immediately looked away. The man on the massive bay horse was a stranger, but she knew better than to engage. Strangers heard the stories just like everyone else. "Ma'am," he said again, "is this the road to the Redemption Creek Township?" She had to answer. Basic decency required it, even if the town had forgotten what decency meant. "Yes, sir." Another mile straight ahead. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Thank you." He tipped his hat, but he didn't move on. Sarah could feel his eyes on her, studying. She knew what he saw. A woman of 26 who looked 40, worn down by grief and shame that wasn't even hers to carry. Her dress was mended in a dozen places, her hands rough from work she'd never done before Thomas died. "You live nearby?" he asked. "Not far." Sarah started walking, hoping he'd take the hint. Instead, he dismounted and walked beside her, leading his horse. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed to block out the sun. His face was weathered, marked by a scar that ran along his jaw, but his eyes were kind, too kind. That kindness would disappear once he reached town and heard the stories. "Name's James Cordell," he said. "I'm here about a property purchase." "Then you'll want to speak with Mr. Peterson at the land office." Sarah kept her eyes on the road. "I will. But I'm also looking for someone, a Mrs. Sarah Mitchell." Sarah's steps faltered, her heart hammered against her ribs. "Why?" "I have business with her. Do you know where I might find her?" This was it. This was how it would end. Whatever business he had, it couldn't be good. More debts, more accusations, more proof that she'd never escape Thomas's shadow. "I'm Sarah Mitchell." James Cordell stopped walking. Sarah stopped too, finally meeting his eyes. Let him see her face when he delivered whatever blow he'd come to deal. "You're Sarah Mitchell?" His surprise was evident. "Thomas Mitchell's widow?" "I am." She lifted her chin. She wouldn't cower. "Not anymore." "Ma'am, I've been searching for you for 3 months. Then congratulations on your persistence. Whatever debt you've come to collect, I can't pay it. The bank took everything. I have nothing left." "I'm not here to collect a debt." James studied her face, his expression shifting from surprise to something else. Concern. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm here because your husband saved my life, and I owe him a debt I can never repay." The words didn't make sense. Sarah shook her head. "Thomas never mentioned anyone named Cordell. He never mentioned saving anyone. It was during the war. I was 17, barely old enough to carry a rifle. We were trapped behind enemy lines, and your husband, he was our medic. He got me out, got 3 of us out, when he could have saved himself, took a bullet in his leg doing it." Sarah's throat tightened. Thomas had walked with a limp. He'd always said it was from a horse-riding accident. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I made him a promise. Told him if I ever made something of myself, I'd make sure his family was taken care of. Took me years, but I struck silver in Montana. Made enough to keep that promise. And then I heard he'd passed. Heard his widow was struggling, and I came as fast as I could. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. Sarah looked around, half expecting the townspeople to appear, laughing at how easily she'd been fooled. I don't need charity, Mr. Cordell. It's not charity, it's a debt, and it's long overdue. I don't know you. For all I know, you're another person looking to take advantage of Thomas Mitchell's widow. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. What happened here, Mrs. Mitchell? What turned this town against you? That's none of your concern. Maybe not, but I can see you're alone, and I know Thomas Mitchell wouldn't have wanted that. The man I knew cared deeply for people. He talked about his wife, about the life he was building with her. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She blinked them back. The man you knew kept secrets, Mr. Cordell. Secrets that destroyed everything when they came to light. What kind of secrets? The kind that make a town turn its back on a widow. The kind that make people believe I was part of it, that I knew, that I helped him. Sarah started walking again, faster this time. She'd said too much already. James Cordell would hear the full story soon enough, and then he'd disappear like everyone else. But he didn't disappear. He fell into step beside her, patient and quiet, until they reached the small cabin. It wasn't much. One room, a leaning chimney, windows that didn't quite close properly, but it was hers. This is where I live, Mr. Cordell. As you can see, I don't need much, and I certainly don't need whatever you think you owe my late husband. James looked at the cabin, then at her. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm staying at the boarding house in town. I'd like to call on you tomorrow, if I may. There are things we need to discuss. There's nothing to discuss. Please. The word was soft, almost pleading. Give me one conversation. If after that you want me to leave, I will. Sarah wanted to refuse. She wanted to close the door and pretend this man and his impossible promises didn't exist. But something in his eyes stopped her. Maybe it was the genuine concern. Maybe it was the fact that no one had looked at her with anything but contempt in 6 months. One conversation, she agreed. Tomorrow afternoon. James tipped his hat. Thank you, Mom. I'll see you then. Sarah watched him mount his horse and ride toward town. She waited until he disappeared from sight. Then she went inside and finally let the tears fall. She cried for Thomas, for the man she thought she knew. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the reputation she'd never get back. And she cried because for just a moment, James Cordell had looked at her like she was still a person worth seeing. The next afternoon, Sarah swept the cabin floor for the 3rd time. She'd baked bread that morning, using the last of her flour. She'd mended her best dress, the blue one that wasn't quite as faded as the others. She told herself it was just about being presentable, about maintaining dignity. She didn't let herself think about the flutter in her stomach when James Cordell knocked on the door. He stood on her porch, holding a bundle wrapped in brown paper. Afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell. I hope I'm not disturbing you. You're right on time, Mr. Cordell. Please, come in. He had to duck to enter, his frame filling the small space. Sarah suddenly became aware of how sparse everything was. 1 table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, a single shelf with a few books, the fireplace that smoked more than it heated. It's not much, she said, but you're welcome to sit. James set the bundle on the table. I brought supplies from the general store. The woman there said these were items you'd been asking for. Sarah's face flushed. Mr. Cordell, I told you I don't need charity. And I told you it's not charity. Mrs. Mitchell, may I be direct with you? I suspect you will be regardless of my answer. A slight smile crossed his face. Fair enough. I went into town yesterday. I heard the stories. Sarah's hands clenched. Then you know why you should leave. I know what people are saying, but I also know that people often say things that aren't true, especially when they're angry and looking for someone to blame. The account books were real, Mr. Cordell. Thomas embezzled over $20,000 from the bank, money that belonged to the miners, the farmers, families who trusted him. When he died, it all came out. The bank failed. People lost everything. And they blame you. They assume I knew. They assume I lived well on stolen money. They assume I'm hiding what's left. Sarah laughed bitterly. If only I were. If only there was something left to hide. James leaned forward. Did you know? No! The word came out fierce, final. I didn't know. Thomas handled all the finances. I was the dutiful wife who kept house and attended church socials. I trusted him completely. And when he died, when I found those ledgers, I felt like I was discovering a stranger. What did you do with the ledgers? Turned them over to the bank. Told them everything I'd found. I thought it would help. I thought they'd understand I wasn't part of it. Sarah shook her head. Instead, they took everything Thomas and I had built together. The house, the furniture, my mother's jewelry. They took it all, and it wasn't even close to enough. Those people still lost their savings, and they still look at me like I'm the one who took it. Where's the money now? I don't know. The ledgers showed withdrawals. Large amounts moved in and out, but Thomas died before I could ask him what he'd done with it. The bank investigators searched everywhere. They found nothing. James was quiet, his dark eyes thoughtful. What if I told you I don't care about the money? Then I'd say you're either very rich or very foolish. Maybe both. His smile was gentle. Mrs. Mitchell, I came here to honor a promise. I still intend to do that. But now I'm also here because I see a woman who's been treated unfairly, and I'd like to help. Why? The question burst from Sarah's lips. Why would you help me? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Because Thomas Mitchell gave me my life back. Because the man I knew was honorable, even if he made terrible mistakes. And because, James paused, because you deserve better than this. Sarah felt her defenses cracking. This man, this stranger, was offering her something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. What kind of help are you offering, Mr. Caudle? First, I want to buy you proper supplies, not charity. An investment. I believe there's more to this story than anyone knows, and I'd like to find the truth. And if the truth is that Thomas was simply a thief and I was too blind to see it, then at least you'll know. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering. Sarah studied him. James Caudle was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and eyes that had seen hardship but hadn't become hard. His hands were calloused, working man's hands, despite his talk of silver strikes. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy. It terrified her. I can't pay you back, she said. I'm not asking you to. People will talk. A widow and a strange man working together. It will only make things worse. Let them talk. They're already talking. He had a point. 1 week, Sarah said. Give me 1 week to think about this. If I decide to accept your help, I'll send word to the boarding house. James stood, and Sarah realized again how large he was. But his size didn't frighten her. Instead, there was something comforting about his presence, like having a wall between her and the world. 1 week, he agreed. But Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to start asking questions in town regardless. If there's something to find, I'll find it. After he left, Sarah unwrapped the bundle he'd brought. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, candles, basic supplies she'd been doing without. Tucked at the bottom was a smaller package wrapped in cloth. Inside was a book, a new book, the leather binding still stiff. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Sarah opened the cover and found an inscription in careful script for Mrs. Mitchell, who deserves her own happy ending. J.C. She sat down at her small table, and for the first time in 6 months, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. James Caudle had faced down claim jumpers, survived blizzards in the Montana wilderness, and once stared down a grizzly bear with nothing but a hunting knife. None of that prepared him for the reception he received in Redemption Creek. The boarding house was run by a pinch-faced woman named Mrs. Garrett, who made her disapproval of him clear from the moment he mentioned Sarah Mitchell's name. You'll find no friends here if you're keeping company with that woman, she'd sniffed. James had smiled politely and paid for another week. The town itself was typical of Colorado settlements. One main street, a few side roads, buildings that looked permanent even though everyone knew these mining towns could vanish as quickly as they appeared. The general store, the saloon, the church, the bank, all the pieces of civilization transplanted to the wilderness. He started with the bank. A man named Peterson greeted him with the enthusiasm of a mortician. Mr. Caudle, I understand you're interested in property. I am. But first, I'd like to ask you about Thomas Mitchell. Peterson's face darkened. That thief. What about him? I served with him during the war. I'm trying to understand what happened. What happened is he stole from this bank, from every honest person in this town, and then he had the good grace to die before we could see him hang. And his widow, probably hiding the money somewhere. We searched the house, but there are plenty of places to hide things out here. James kept his voice level. What makes you think she knew anything about it? She was his wife. Of course she knew. Women always know. Did you find any evidence linking her to the theft? Peterson's silence was answer enough. James tried the saloon next. The bartender, a grizzled man named Dutch, was more forthcoming after James bought a round for the house. Thomas Mitchell seemed like a good man, Dutch said, wiping down the bar. Always paid his tabs, never caused trouble. But you never really know a person, do you? What about his wife, Sarah? She's a good woman. Too good for how she's being treated, if you ask me. Not many people seem to share that opinion. People are afraid, Dutch said quietly. They lost money they couldn't afford to lose. They need someone to be angry at. And Thomas is dead, so Sarah's the next best thing. You think she's innocent. I think she loved her husband and got betrayed twice. Once by him, once by this town. James spent the next 3 days talking to anyone who would speak with him. The picture that emerged was troubling. Thomas Mitchell had been well-liked, trusted, seemingly honest. But he'd also been private about his work, keeping the bank's records to himself. When the mine workers tried to withdraw their savings last summer, Thomas had stalled, making excuses. Then he died suddenly, a heart attack at his desk, and when they'd finally looked at the books, the truth came out. $23,000 was missing. The bank had collapsed. The miners couldn't get paid. Families had lost everything. Sarah Mitchell had turned over every document she could find, had cooperated completely with the investigation, but she couldn't explain where the money went, and that made her suspect in everyone's eyes. What interested James was what didn't make sense. Thomas had lived modestly. The house was nice, but not extravagant. Sarah's clothes were plain. They didn't take trips or throw lavish parties. Where had the money gone? On the 4th day, James visited the church. Reverend Harris was an older man with kind eyes and a worn Bible. "You're asking about the Mitchells," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am. I'm trying to understand." "So am I, son. So am I." The Reverend sighed. Thomas was a deacon here. He taught Sunday school. He seemed genuinely faithful. When the truth came out, it shook this whole community, made people question everything. What about Sarah? Sarah is one of the finest women I've ever known. She's helped the sick, fed the poor, never had a harsh word for anyone. The way this town has treated her breaks my heart. Why don't you defend her? I have, from this very pulpit. But fear is a powerful thing, Mr. Caudle. People are afraid of their own shadows right now, afraid of who they can trust. And I'm just one voice. James left the church with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. Sarah Mitchell was innocent, and the town knew it deep down. They just needed someone to blame, and she was convenient. That night, James sat in his room at the boarding house thinking. He'd made a promise to Thomas Mitchell to take care of his family. But this was becoming more than that. This was about a woman who deserved justice, who deserved to be seen for who she really was. And if he was honest with himself, it was about more than justice too. Sarah Mitchell intrigued him. She'd been beaten down by circumstances but hadn't broken. She had dignity, intelligence, and a quiet strength that drew him in. He told her 1 week. 4 days had passed. James knew what he needed to do. He needed to find that money. Sarah didn't wait the full week. On the 5th day, she walked to town, ignoring the stares and whispers, and knocked on the door of the boarding house. Mrs. Garrett answered with a disapproving frown. "Mrs. Mitchell, I suppose you're here for Mr. Caudle." "I am, if he's available. He's in the parlor, though I don't approve of unmarried men and women meeting unchaperoned." "Then please join us. I have nothing to hide." James stood when Sarah entered the parlor. He'd been reading, and she noticed it was a geology text. A man of education as well as action. "Mrs. Mitchell, I wasn't expecting you. I've made my decision. I'd like to accept your help if the offer still stands." "It does." James gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Mrs. Garrett hovered in the doorway until Sarah looked at her directly. "Mrs. Garrett, Mr. Caudle and I are discussing business. Would you like to stay and listen, or shall I summarize our conversation for you later?" The older woman huffed and disappeared. James smiled. "You have a spine of steel, Mrs. Mitchell. 6 months of persecution will do that to a person." Sarah folded her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding the truth. I realized that I've been so focused on surviving that I haven't tried to clear my name. I've just accepted it. That ends now." "Does it?" "Mr. Caudle, I don't know what you expect to find. The bank investigators went through everything. If there was money hidden somewhere, They would have found it, maybe. Or maybe they didn't know where to look. James leaned forward. I've been asking questions around town. I've learned some interesting things, such as the fact that Thomas was making regular trips to Denver in the months before he died. Did you know that? Sarah frowned. He said they were business trips. Bank business. The bank says they never authorized any trips to Denver. A chill ran through Sarah. What are you suggesting? I'm not sure yet, but I think Thomas was doing something in Denver, something connected to the missing money. I'd like to go there, see what I can find. But I need your permission. My permission. As his widow, you're the only one who can legally authorize access to his personal effects, his correspondence. If there's anything the bank missed, you're the key to finding it. Sarah considered this. Going to Denver, digging into Thomas's secrets, it felt like betrayal, but he'd already betrayed her. Why should she protect him now? What do you need from me? A letter, authorizing me to act on your behalf, and anything you might have that belonged to Thomas. Letters, documents, anything the bank didn't take. They took everything from the house, but Sarah hesitated. There might be something. Thomas's mother, before she died, she gave him a small trunk. Family heirlooms, she said. It was in the attic of the old cabin, the one I live in now. I never looked inside. It didn't seem right. May I look? Sarah nodded slowly. Come tomorrow. I'll have it ready. As she stood to leave, James touched her arm gently. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know something. Regardless of what we find, I'm going to make sure this town sees the truth. You don't deserve what they're doing to you. The truth might not change anything. It might not, but you'll know, and sometimes that's enough. Sarah met his eyes, saw the sincerity there, and felt something shift in her chest. She'd been so alone for so long, carrying this burden by herself. Having someone on her side, someone who believed in her, it was almost overwhelming. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. We haven't found anything. I'm not thanking you for that. I'm thanking you for seeing me, for not looking at me like I'm something shameful. James's expression softened. Sarah, he caught himself. Mrs. Mitchell, anyone who looks at you and sees shame is a fool. The use of her first name should have been improper. It should have offended her. Instead, it felt right, like a piece of familiarity in a world that had become hostile and strange. Sarah is fine, she said. Mrs. Mitchell makes me feel like I'm still wearing the chains of what people expect me to be. Then Sarah it is, and you should call me James. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. Until tomorrow, James. That night, Sarah climbed into the attic of the cabin. It was cramped and dusty, filled with remnants of Thomas's mother's life. She found the trunk in the corner, exactly where she remembered seeing it years ago. It was locked. Sarah searched for a key, but found nothing. Finally, she used a hammer to break the lock. Inside were clothes, old photographs, letters from Thomas's father to his mother, sweet letters full of love and longing. Sarah felt a pang reading them. Had Thomas ever loved her like that? Had any of it been real? At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound journal. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was Thomas's, but younger, less refined. The entries started 20 years ago, when he was just a boy. She read for hours, learning about a Thomas she'd never known, a boy who loved his parents, who dreamed of making them proud, a young man who went to war and came back changed. The entries became darker after that, filled with guilt and nightmares. Then, 5 years ago, the tone changed again. Thomas wrote about meeting someone in Denver, a man named Calhoun, a man who offered him a way to make real money. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the details. Thomas had been embezzling from the bank for years, not for himself, but to invest in Calhoun's mining operations. It was supposed to make them rich. The money was supposed to be returned before anyone noticed. But Calhoun had disappeared, taken everything and vanished. Thomas's last entry was dated 3 days before he died. I can't live with what I've done. I've destroyed everything. The bank will fail, people will lose their savings, and it's all my fault. Sarah will hate me when she knows the truth. Maybe that's what I deserve. I tried to fix it. I tried to find Calhoun, to get the money back, but he's gone. I'm ruined. We're all ruined. God forgive me. Sarah closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. Thomas hadn't been evil. He'd been foolish, desperate, weak. He'd made terrible choices, trying to fix previous mistakes. And in the end, it had killed him. But more importantly, the journal proved Sarah's innocence. It proved she knew nothing, and it gave them a name, Calhoun. James arrived at dawn, and Sarah met him at the door with swollen eyes and the journal in her hands. "I found it," she said. "I found the truth." They sat at her small table, and Sarah watched James read. His jaw tightened with each page, his eyes darkening with anger. When he finished, he looked at her with an expression that made her heart ache. Pity and fury mixed together. "Sarah, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for the people who lost their savings because my husband was a fool. He was trying to make things right. He made things worse. And then he died and left me to face the consequences." Sarah's voice broke. "I loved him, James. I loved him so much. And now I don't even know if he ever really loved me." James reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "The man who wrote about you in this journal loved you. He was terrified of losing you. That's real. But he lied to me about everything. He did. And that was wrong. But Sarah, this journal, it changes everything. It proves you knew nothing. It gives us a lead on the money." Calhoun. James's grip on her hand tightened. "I'm going to find him. I'm going to get that money back, or at least find out what happened to it. And then this town is going to know the truth. It won't bring Thomas back. It won't fix what he did. No, but it will free you." Sarah looked at their joined hands. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with kindness. James's touch felt like an anchor, keeping her from floating away into despair. "Come with me," James said suddenly. "What?" "To Denver. Come with me. We'll find Calhoun together." James, I can't. People will talk. An unmarried woman traveling with a man, let them talk. They're already saying terrible things about you. At least, this way, you'll be there to defend yourself. You'll be there to find the truth. I have nothing to wear, no money for a hotel. I'd be a burden. You'd be my partner in this investigation. And as for money, I have plenty. Please, Sarah, don't face this alone anymore." She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted to say yes. But fear held her back. Fear of what people would say. Fear of what it might mean. Fear of the feelings that were already growing in her chest when she looked at this man. "Give me today to think about it," she said. "I'll have an answer by tonight." James nodded. "I'll be here at sundown." After he left, Sarah sat alone with the journal. She read Thomas's words again, looking for what? Absolution, understanding, a reason to forgive him. Instead, she found anger. Thomas had been weak. He'd made choices that hurt innocent people. And yes, he'd regretted it. But regret didn't feed the families who'd lost everything. Regret didn't rebuild the bank. Regret didn't save Sarah from 6 months of hell. She'd mourned him. She'd defended his memory, even as the town crucified her for it. But reading his own words, seeing his selfishness laid bare, she felt the last chains of loyalty break. Thomas Mitchell didn't deserve her continued sacrifice. Sarah deserved to be free. When James returned that evening, she was waiting on the porch with a small bag. "I'll come with you," she said. "But James, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this just to clear my name. I'm doing this for me, because I need to know the whole truth, even if it hurts. Can you accept that?" James smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I wouldn't want it any other way. And James, when this is over, whether we find the money or not, whether my name is cleared or not, I'm leaving Redemption Creek. I'm starting over somewhere new. This town has taken enough from me. Then we'll make sure you have the means to start that new life, whatever it takes." They left at first light, riding side by side on the road to Denver. Sarah had never been more than 10 miles from Redemption Creek. The world seemed impossibly large, impossibly beautiful. James was patient with her inexperience, adjusting their pace when she grew tired, pointing out landmarks and wildlife. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about Montana, about finding silver, about the loneliness of the wilderness. She told him about her childhood, about losing her parents to influenza, about the quiet dreams she'd had before Thomas died. The first night, they stopped at a way station. The proprietor assumed they were married, and James didn't correct him. Sarah should have been scandalized. Instead, she felt a strange thrill. They had separate rooms, of course. James was nothing if not a gentleman, but Sarah lay awake, thinking about the man in the room next door. This stranger who'd appeared in her life like something from a storybook. This man who looked at her and saw value, saw worth, saw someone worth fighting for. She couldn't let herself fall for him. That would be foolish. They barely knew each other. He was helping her out of obligation to Thomas, nothing more. But her heart didn't listen to logic. Her heart had already started to hope. Denver was chaos compared to Redemption Creek. Buildings crowded together, people everywhere, the constant noise of commerce and life. Sarah felt overwhelmed and exhilarated in equal measure. James secured them rooms at a respectable hotel, adjoining but separate. The clerk raised an eyebrow, but said nothing when James paid in cash. "Where do we start?" Sarah asked once they were alone in James's room, which was larger and had a sitting area where they could talk privately. "With the name Calhoun. It's not much, but it's all we have." James pulled out a map of Denver. According to Thomas's journal, he met Calhoun at a mining office on Larimer Street. We start there. The mining office was a cramped space above a saloon. The clerk, a nervous young man, looked up as they entered. "Help you? We're looking for information about a man named Calhoun. He was involved in mining operations about 5 years ago." The clerk's face went pale. "Calhoun? You don't want to be asking about him. Why not?" "Because Calhoun's a legend around here, and not the good kind. He ran one of the biggest mining frauds in Colorado history, took investors for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The law's been looking for him for 3 years, but he disappeared. Some say he went to California, others say Mexico. A few think he's dead." Sarah's heart sank. "So the money's gone. If Calhoun took it, yeah, it's gone. That man could sell snow to an Eskimo. He had investors from all over the territory. When it all fell apart, there were people who lost everything." "Do you know any of those investors?" James asked. "Anyone who might know more about Calhoun?" The clerk hesitated, then scribbled a name on a piece of paper. "Talk to Walter Harrison. He lost his family's entire fortune to Calhoun. If anyone knows about tracking that snake down, it's him." Walter Harrison lived in a modest house on the edge of Denver. He was a man in his 50s, gray-haired and bitter-eyed. "Calhoun," he spat when James mentioned the name. "Come to gloat, have you? Come to see what's left of the fool he ruined?" "No, sir," James said quietly. "We're trying to find him. He took money from this lady's late husband." Harrison looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "Your husband invested with Calhoun. He embezzled from his bank to invest with Calhoun," Sarah said, deciding on honesty. "When Calhoun disappeared, the bank failed. Innocent people lost their savings. I'm trying to make it right." "Can't make it right if the money's gone, but maybe we can find out what happened. Maybe we can give people closure, if nothing else." Harrison sighed heavily. "Come in. I'll tell you what I know." Over coffee, Harrison told them about Calhoun, a smooth-talking conman who'd claimed to have inside information on silver deposits. He'd shown investors what looked like legitimate assay reports, had taken them on tours of his mines, had paid out early dividends to build trust. Then he'd collected one massive final investment and vanished. "The law traced him as far as Santa Fe," Harrison said. "Then the trail went cold, but I've kept looking. Spent every spare cent I had hiring investigators. One of them thinks Calhoun might be in a place called Tall Pines, New Mexico, running a lumber operation under a different name." "What name?" James asked. "Caleb Harris." Sarah and James exchanged glances. It was thin, the thinnest of leads, but it was something. "Mr. Harrison," Sarah said, "if we find him, if we recover any money, I'll make sure you get what's owed to you. I don't want charity." "It's not charity. It's justice. Your money was stolen, same as ours. You deserve it back." Harrison studied her. "You're not what I expected, Mrs. Mitchell." "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, someone more concerned with her own problems." "I have plenty of concerns, Mr. Harrison, but I've learned something these past months. We're all just trying to survive. Some of us do it with dignity, some without. I choose dignity." As they left, Harrison called after them. "Mrs. Mitchell, be careful. If that is Calhoun in New Mexico, he won't give up without a fight. He's dangerous." "So am I," Sarah said quietly. "When I need to be. In the street." James looked at her with new respect. "You meant that, about sharing any recovered money?" "Of course I did. Thomas stole from innocent people. If there's a way to make that right, even partially, I'm going to do it. Even if it means you get nothing." "James, I have nothing now. At least this way some good might come from all this pain." He touched her face so gently it made her breath catch. "You're remarkable, Sarah Mitchell. I'm practical. No, you're remarkable. His thumb brushed her cheek and Sarah felt heat spread through her entire body. And brave. And too good for this world. They stood there in the middle of a Denver street, lost in each other's eyes. Sarah saw the moment James realized what he was doing, saw him start to pull away. She caught his hand, keeping it against her face. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't pull away. Not yet. Sarah, you've been through so much. I don't want to take advantage." "You're not. James, for 6 months, I felt like I was dying slowly. Like every day took another piece of me until there'd be nothing left. But since you came into my life, I felt alive again. Is that wrong?" "No, God, no." James's other hand came up to cup her face. "But Sarah, you're vulnerable right now. You're hurting. I don't want you to confuse gratitude with what? With caring about you? James, I know the difference. I'm not a child." "I know you're not. That's what scares me." "Why does it scare you?" He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Sarah saw something she hadn't expected. Fear, longing, hope. "Because I'm falling for you," he said roughly. "Because when I look at you, I don't see Thomas Mitchell's widow. I see a woman I want to protect, to cherish, to—" He stopped himself. "It's too soon. You're too raw. I should be helping you heal, not confusing things with my own feelings." Sarah's heart was racing. She should step back, should agree with him, should maintain proper distance. But she'd spent 6 months being proper, being correct, being what everyone expected. She was done with that. "What if I want to be confused?" she asked. "What if I want to feel something other than grief and shame?" "Sarah," she stood on her toes and kissed him. It was brief, chaste, just a brush of lips, but it sent fire through both of them. James pulled back, breathing hard. "We can't do this." "Why not?" "Because when this is over, you're going to start a new life. You said so yourself. And I'm not the kind of man who can give you what you deserve." "What do I deserve?" "Everything. A home, security, respectability. I'm a drifter, Sarah. I struck it lucky in Montana, but before that, I was nobody. After this, I'll probably go back to being nobody." "You're not nobody to me." "I am. I'm just the man who happened to owe your husband a debt." Sarah stepped back, hurt lancing through her. "Is that all this is to you? Paying off a debt?" "No. Damn it, no." James ran his hand through his hair. "But it should be. For your sake, it should be. Stop deciding what's good for me. I'm capable of making my own choices, even when those choices might hurt you, especially then. James, I've been hurt, I've been broken, I've been destroyed and rebuilt so many times in the past 6 months that I barely recognize myself. But I'm still here, I'm still standing, and I'm telling you that whatever this is between us, I want to explore it. Unless," Sarah's voice faltered, "unless you don't feel the same way." "You know I do." "Then why are we fighting this?" James looked at her for a long moment. Then he made a decision she could see written on his face. "We're going to New Mexico," he said. "We're going to find Calhoun or Harris or whoever he is now. We're going to get answers. And when that's done, when you're free of all this, if you still want to explore whatever this is between us, we will. But not before, not while you're still tied to the past." It wasn't what Sarah wanted to hear, but she understood his reasoning, even respected it. "And if I don't want to wait, then you're going to have to, because I care about you too much to risk hurting you." Sarah wanted to argue, but she saw the resolve in his eyes and knew it would be pointless. "Fine," she said. "We wait. But James, when this is over, you don't get to decide I'm better off without you. That's my choice to make." "Agreed." They left for New Mexico the next morning. Tall Pines was a lumber town nestled in the mountains of northern New Mexico. It smelled of pine sap and sawdust, the constant buzz of saws filling the air. They asked around carefully, not wanting to spook their quarry. Yes, there was a Caleb Harris. He owned one of the larger lumber operations, kept to himself mostly, but was well respected in town. Sarah and James checked into the town's only hotel and planned their approach. "We can't just accuse him," Sarah said. "If he is Calhoun, he'll run the moment he suspects we know." "Agreed. We need proof first." "How do we get proof?" James thought for a moment. "I could apply for work at his lumber operation, get close to him, see if there's anything that connects him to Denver. That could take weeks. Do you have a better idea?" Sarah did. A risky idea, but the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. "What if I approach him directly, not as someone looking for Calhoun, but as someone looking for investment opportunities? If he is a con man, he won't be able to resist a potential mark." "Absolutely not. If he's dangerous, Then I'll have you watching. James, think about it. A widow with a small inheritance, new to town, looking for advice on how to invest wisely. I'm exactly the kind of person a conman would target. And if he recognizes you from Redemption Creek, why would he? He took Thomas's money years ago. He's never met me. As far as he knows, I'm just another potential victim. James didn't like it. Sarah could see that clearly. But he also couldn't argue with the logic. I don't leave your side, he said finally. I'm your cousin, there to advise you. If things go wrong, you'll be there to protect me. I know. They spent the next day establishing their cover story. Sarah was Mary Henderson, a widow from Kansas with a small inheritance from her late husband's family. James was John Henderson, her cousin, who'd struck it moderately well in mining and was helping her navigate the treacherous world of investments. The story was close enough to truth to be believable. Caleb Harris's office was in the center of town, above a general store. They were told to come at 3 o'clock. The man who greeted them was handsome, probably in his early 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and a smile that was just a shade too practiced. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Henderson, please. Come in. Sarah's heart was pounding, but she kept her face calm. Thank you for seeing us, Mr. Harris. Always happy to meet new residents of Tall Pines. Now, I understand you're interested in investment opportunities. Sarah launched into her cover story, playing the part of a nervous widow, uncertain and in need of guidance. Harris ate it up, exactly as she'd hoped. As he talked about lumber prospects and profit margins, Sarah studied him. There was something calculating behind his pleasant demeanor. Something that made her skin crawl. This was Calhoun. She was certain of it. James must have sensed it too, because his body language shifted subtly, becoming more protective. Of course, lumber is a long-term investment, Harris was saying, but I do have opportunities for those looking for quicker returns. Mining ventures, for instance. I have connections in Colorado that... Colorado? Sarah let excitement color her voice. My late husband always said Colorado was full of opportunity. Indeed it is. In fact, I used to operate there myself. Before he paused, and something dark flickered across his face. Before certain unpleasantness forced me to relocate. Unpleasantness? Business rivals. You know how it is. Some people can't stand to see others succeed. James leaned forward. What kind of mining opportunities are you talking about? Harris pulled out several documents, all of them professional-looking, all of them probably fraudulent. Sarah recognized the pattern from Harrison's description. This was exactly how Calhoun had operated in Denver. I'm intrigued, Sarah said, but Mr. Harris, I hope you'll forgive me for being cautious. After my husband died, I learned he'd made some poor investments. I can't afford to make the same mistakes. Of course, caution is wise. Tell me, Mrs. Henderson, what were these poor investments your husband made? Silver mines in Colorado, actually. A man named Calhoun convinced him they were going to make us rich. Instead, we lost everything. Sarah watched Harris's face carefully. For just a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. She saw recognition, calculation, and then the smooth smile returned. Calhoun, you say. The name's not familiar, but there are many dishonest men in the mining business. That's why it's so important to work with people you can trust. Like you, like me. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. Mrs. Henderson, I understand your hesitation. What if I gave you references? People in this town who can vouch for my character. That would be helpful. They left an hour later with a list of names and a promise to consider Harris's investment opportunities. Outside, James pulled Sarah into an alley. That's him, he said. I'd stake my life on it. So would I. Did you see his face when I mentioned Calhoun? I did. But Sarah, now he knows someone's asking about that name. If he gets spooked, he won't. He thinks he fooled us. Men like that, they're so confident in their own superiority that they can't imagine we'd see through them. What now? Now we need proof. Something that will stand up in court. Something that connects Caleb Harris to Calhoun beyond doubt. They spent the next 2 days investigating. James got work at one of Harris's lumber operations and started asking questions. Sarah befriended the hotel clerk, a gossipy young woman who knew everyone's business. What they learned was troubling. Harris had appeared in Tall Pines 3 years ago with plenty of money and no clear history. He'd bought the lumber operation outright, in cash. He lived well, but not lavishly, and he had a reputation for taking advantage of newcomers with his investment opportunities. "We need to search his office," Sarah said one evening as they sat in James's hotel room reviewing what they'd learned. "That's breaking and entering." "I know, but how else do we get proof?" James sighed. "If we do this, we do it my way. I go in alone. You stay here. James, no arguments. If something goes wrong, I need you safe. Promise me." Sarah wanted to fight, but she saw the fear in his eyes, the genuine concern for her safety, and she couldn't. "I promise. But please be careful." That night, James broke into Harris's office. He was back within an hour, carrying a small leather portfolio. "Letters," he said, spreading them on the bed. "Correspondence between Harris and associates in Denver, using his real name in a few places, talking about relocating and starting fresh. And this," he held up a photograph. It showed a group of men, and written on the back in faded ink, "Denver Mining Association, 1870, J. Calhoun, third from left." The man in the photograph was unmistakably the same man they knew as Caleb Harris. "We have him," Sarah breathed. "We have him," James agreed. "But now comes the hard part, getting him to justice." They took their evidence to the territorial marshal the next morning. The marshal, a tired-looking man named Dawson, listened to their story with increasing interest. "Calhoun," he said. "Yeah, I've heard about him. Federal marshals have been looking for him for years. If this is really him," he studied the photograph and letters, "this might be enough for an arrest warrant." "Might be. I'll telegraph Denver, see if they can confirm the photograph. If they do, we'll bring Harris in for questioning. And if he runs, then we'll hunt him down. Don't worry, folks. If this is Calhoun, he's not getting away." But they underestimated their quarry. That night, as Sarah and James were having dinner in the hotel dining room, a boy rushed in. "Fire!" he shouted. "Harris's lumber mill is on fire!" The town erupted into chaos. Everyone rushed to help, forming bucket brigades, trying to save the mill and prevent the fire from spreading to the forest. In the confusion, James grabbed Sarah's arm. "He's running! I guarantee it." They rushed to Harris's house, but it was already dark and empty. In his office, they found the safe open and cleaned out. "He knew," Sarah said. "Somehow, he knew we were onto him. The marshal must have telegraphed Denver. Someone tipped him off." James's face was grim. "Or we weren't as careful as we thought." They returned to the marshal's office. Dawson was already organizing a posse. "He can't have gotten far," the marshal said. "There's only one road out of town, and we've got men watching it." But Calhoun had disappeared into the forest, and by morning it was clear the trail had gone cold. Sarah sat in her hotel room, numb with disappointment. They'd been so close. James found her there, staring out the window at the smoking ruins of the lumber mill. "We'll find him," he said. "Will we? He's been running for years. He's good at it." "Sarah, all those people, James, all the people he hurt. Thomas, Mr. Harrison, the miners in Redemption Creek. And he's just going to get away with it." James sat beside her, taking her hand. "Maybe he will. Or maybe he'll slip up eventually. Men like that always do." "That's not good enough." "I know." They sat in silence for a while. Then Sarah spoke, her voice quiet but determined. "I'm going back to Redemption Creek." "What?" "I have Thomas's journal. I have proof that I knew nothing about the embezzlement. Even if we never find Calhoun, even if that money is gone forever, I can at least clear my name. And then I'm leaving, just like I planned. I'll start over somewhere new." James was quiet for a long moment. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere without memories. Somewhere I can just be Sarah, not Thomas Mitchell's widow." "Sarah, James stopped, struggling with something. "Come to Montana with me." She looked at him, startled. "What?" "Come to Montana. I have land there, a house. It's rough country, but it's beautiful. You could start fresh there and He took a breath. "I know I said we should wait. I know I said you needed time. But Sarah, I can't imagine going back to that empty house without you. I can't imagine waking up every day and not knowing if you're okay, if you're happy, if you're—" "James, I love you." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving and healing and figuring out who you are without Thomas. But I love you, Sarah Mitchell. I love your strength and your kindness and your refusal to be broken. I love the way you stand up for what's right even when it costs you. I love—" Sarah kissed him, cutting off his words. This kiss wasn't chaste or brief. It was deep and full of everything she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. I've been trying not to. I've been telling myself it's too soon, that I'm just grateful, that I'm confused. But James, every time I look at you, every time you smile at me or stand up for me or just exist in my space, I fall a little more. Sarah, but I can't come to Montana with you, not yet. She felt him tense. Why not? Because you were right. I need to figure out who I am without Thomas, without this scandal, without all of it. I need to know I'm choosing you because I want you, not because I need rescuing. How long? I don't know. 6 months? A year? However long it takes for me to build a life that's mine, not dependent on anyone else. James pulled back, looking at her with such intensity, it took her breath away. And after that, if you still want me, if you're still willing to wait, then yes, I'll come to Montana. I'll build a life with you. If I still want you? James laughed, but there was pain in it. Sarah, I'll want you in 6 months. I'll want you in 6 years. I'll want you until the day I die. Then we have a plan, a terrible plan that involves us being apart. A necessary plan. James, I won't be like I was with Thomas. I won't be the woman who doesn't know what her husband does, who doesn't have her own thoughts or money or independence. I need to prove to myself that I can stand alone before I choose to stand with someone. James cupped her face in his hands. You're already the strongest person I know. Then give me time to know it too. He kissed her again, gentle and sweet and full of promise. 6 months. He said. But Sarah, I'm writing to you every week. And if you need anything at all, you send word and I'll be there. Deal? They left Tall Pines the next morning. The marshal promised to keep searching for Calhoun Harris, to share any information with other territories. It wasn't the victory they'd hoped for, but it was something. Redemption Creek looked different when Sarah returned. Or maybe she was the one who was different. She went straight to the bank, where Mr. Peterson sat behind his desk looking sour. Mrs. Mitchell, back from running, are you? Sarah placed Thomas's journal on his desk. I haven't been running. I've been finding the truth. Read this. Peterson read. His face went from skeptical to shocked to something that might have been shame. He was conned, Peterson said finally. He was, by a man named Calhoun, who disappeared with hundreds of thousands of dollars from investors all over Colorado. Thomas made terrible choices, but he wasn't the villain you made him out to be. And Sarah's voice was steel. I knew nothing about any of it. Mrs. Mitchell, I want a public statement from this bank. I want my name cleared, and I want whatever is left of Thomas's estate released to me immediately. There's nothing left. We took everything to cover the losses. Then I want a letter stating that, a letter confirming I had no involvement in the embezzlement. I want it posted in the town square and sent to every family who lost money. Peterson squirmed. The board would have to approve. Then get the board's approval, because Mr. Peterson, I also have a friend who's willing to invest in rebuilding this bank. A friend with considerable resources who believes this town deserves a second chance. But his investment comes with conditions, and one of those conditions is that I am publicly exonerated. It was a bluff. James had offered to help, but Sarah hadn't asked him to invest in Redemption Creek. This was her fight, but Peterson didn't know that. I'll speak to the board, he said. Sarah left the bank and walked through town with her head high. People stared, people whispered, but this time Sarah didn't care. She stopped at the church where Reverend Harris was tending the small garden. Mrs. Mitchell, he said warmly, you're back. I am. And Reverend, I need a favor. She told him everything, about James, about the journal, about Calhoun. The Reverend listened with growing amazement. You've been searching for the truth this whole time. I have, and I found it. Thomas was a fool and a thief, but I wasn't his accomplice. I need this town to know that. They will. I'll make sure of it. True to his word, the Reverend preached about Sarah the following Sunday, about her integrity, her courage, about the proof she'd found of her innocence. The bank posted its statement, and slowly, grudgingly, the town began to shift. It wasn't immediate forgiveness. Some people would never let go of their anger, but enough people were willing to listen, willing to reconsider, that Sarah felt the weight begin to lift. She sold the cabin and bought a small house in town, one with a proper kitchen and windows that closed. She started a business doing sewing and mending, work she was good at. She made friends with the women who were willing to see past the scandal. And every week, a letter arrived from Montana. James wrote about his life, about the land, about the house he was building. He wrote about missing her, about counting the days. He wrote about small things and big things and everything in between. Sarah wrote back, telling him about rebuilding her life, about the business, about finally feeling like herself again. 6 months became 8, became 10. Sarah wanted to be absolutely sure, wanted to have enough saved that she wasn't coming to James empty-handed. On the 1-year anniversary of the day James Cordell had first ridden into Redemption Creek, Sarah closed her business, sold her house, and boarded a train to Montana. The ranch was more beautiful than James's letters had described. Mountains in the distance, a river running through the property, and a house that was clearly brand new. James was waiting on the porch when the hired wagon dropped Sarah off. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. A year was a long time. James looked older, his face more weathered. Sarah knew she looked different too, stronger, more certain. "You came," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "I told you I would. I was afraid you'd change your mind, afraid you'd realize you didn't need me after all." Sarah walked up the porch steps until she was standing right in front of him. "I don't need you, James Cordell. I don't need anyone, but I want you. I choose you. That's so much better than need." James pulled her into his arms, and Sarah felt like she was finally home. "Marry me," he said. "Right now, today, tomorrow, whenever you're ready. Just say you'll marry me. I'll marry you." "But James, I have conditions," he laughed. "Of course you do. I want to keep my sewing business. I want my own money. I want a voice in decisions about this ranch. Done, done, and done. Anything else? I want to keep looking for Calhoun. I want to make sure he faces justice eventually. We'll hire investigators. We'll never stop looking. And James, I want a marriage that's a partnership. I won't be decorative. I won't be silent. I won't be anything other than exactly who I am. Sarah Mitchell, I fell in love with exactly who you are. I don't want you to be anything else." She kissed him then, pouring a year's worth of longing into it. When they finally broke apart, James was smiling. "So when's the wedding? How about next week? That gives us time to get a preacher out here." "Next week it is." They married in a small ceremony with just a few neighbors present. Sarah wore a simple white dress she'd made herself. James wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable and wonderful at the same time. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, James kissed Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world. That night in the house James had built, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe in happy endings. 18 months later, Sarah was working in the garden when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She looked up to see the territorial marshal riding toward the house. James came out of the barn, his expression immediately cautious. "Marshal Dawson," he said, "this is a surprise. Mr. Cordell, Mrs. Cordell." Dawson tipped his hat to Sarah. "I have news. We found him." Sarah's heart stopped. "Calhoun arrested him 2 weeks ago in Arizona. He'd set up another operation, same pattern as before, but this time one of his investors was a federal marshal's brother. We've been building a case." "Will it stick?" James asked. "It will. We've got victims from 3 territories willing to testify. He's looking at 20 years minimum." Sarah sat down heavily on the porch steps. After all this time, after all the searching, they'd actually caught him. "There's more," Dawson said. "When we arrested Calhoun, we seized his assets. Turned out he'd been living under his real name in Arizona. Got cocky. We found bank accounts, property, investments. The government's working on restitution for his victims." "How much?" Sarah asked. "Can't say exactly yet, but Mrs. Cordell, your late husband, wasn't his only victim. This has been going on for over a decade. There should be substantial funds recovered." Now, after the marshal left, Sarah and James sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "It's over," Sarah said. "It's really over." "How do you feel?" "Relieved, vindicated, and a little sad. Sad for Thomas. He got caught up in something that destroyed him. He made terrible choices, but he wasn't a bad man, just a weak one." James pulled her close. "You've forgiven him." "I have, finally, because holding on to that anger was only hurting me." "You're remarkable, Sarah Cordell." "I'm just me, and you know what? That's finally enough." 3 months later, a bank draft arrived. Sarah's portion of the restitution, enough to pay back everyone who'd lost money in Redemption Creek's bank failure, and still have plenty left over. Sarah sat at her desk, carefully writing checks to every family that had suffered because of Thomas's choices. Each check came with a letter, apologizing, explaining, offering what closure she could. Some people wrote back with thanks, Some never responded, but Sarah felt lighter with each letter she sent. The last check she wrote was to Walter Harrison in Denver. With it, she included a note. Mr. Harrison, justice took longer than it should have, but it came. I hope this helps rebuild what you lost. With gratitude for your help in finding Calhoun, Sarah Cordell. When all the checks were sent, when all the debts were finally paid, Sarah walked out to the field where James was mending a fence. It's done, she said. Every penny distributed. We're free. James looked at her, really looked at her and smiled. You were always free, Sarah. You just needed to believe it. I believe it now. He pulled her into his arms, and Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. She thought about the woman she'd been, the widow in Redemption Creek who'd believed her life was over. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, to this ranch in Montana, to this man who'd seen her value when no one else would. Sarah Mitchell had lost everything and found everything in the span of 2 years. She discovered that the greatest treasure wasn't money or reputation or even justice. It was knowing exactly who she was and being loved for it. And that was worth more than all the silver in Montana.